Éireann Dáil here na Dáil for Corfuin and sin stúra ina Gnífra agus náta gras to brona orin can either horse concrete on its gurúta to sulfur nilabríher agus an le Gní festa agus go three no free star there. Directly beseech your Lord actions by the holy inspirations and carry them on by their gracious assistance. That every word and work of ours may always begin from thee and by thee be happily ended. Through Christ our Lord. Water Services Amendment Number 2 Bill 2014, second stage, in the name of Deputy Mattie McGrath. Could I ask the Deputy to move? Thank you. Please proceed.
Gormachgot, Count Cola. I want to thank, first of all, the Bills Office and your own office, Count Cola, and my own office staff who helped me in preparation of this bill. And thank my colleagues this morning who have turned in here for make up a quorum. I really do appreciate it. I don't see the Minister for the Environment here this morning, which I'm not surprised but disappointed. And while Minister Éireann has a lot of responsibilities, I think the latest one was added to his portfolio was to deal with drugs issue. I wonder if they got away with it. I'd say Minister Kelly would put something into the water that would have us all go to sleep and have us all just lie down and take our dose of the medicine. My bill is effectively an effort to tame the beast of Irish water. And unfortunately, there are many, many hundreds of good staff and good people working in Irish water, as there were in the county councils beforehand, doing a good public service, obliging out of hours and weekends and everything else, and leaving their families to go out and fix breaks and ensure that all those issues and constant water was supplied to the capital city here, but to every corner of Ireland. And salute to people in of the group schemes who were real pioneers and the work they did out there and brought water and community initiative, the late great Canon Hayes, and did all that kind of work and did it voluntary, with enthusiasm and with huge pride. We move on then and we see that some pipe dream somewhere that we set up a big monopoly, and pipe dream is the appropriate word, but the pipes explode every now and then as well, so they didn't check the pipe work first here and it became very explosive, and they have fragmented and they have shattered, and that's where we are now. My bill was put together last September, October. I moved it here with the permission of the Count Cora in November, and thankfully it was drawn out of the lottery for this week. So I want to just address some remarks to it. The government decision in November 19, 2014 was that there would be one overacting, mainly non-executive, Airvia board, with responsibility and accountability for the performance of the Airvia group, i.e. the two subsidiary companies, which are Irish Water and Gas Networks Ireland. The two subsidiaries would be subject to the control and oversight of the parent company, but would have small executive boards to directly manage the business of each subsidiary. I want to make it crystal clear that the activities of all the boards and companies, the subsidiaries and the main board, and crucially any future subsidiaries, will be open to transparency and of FOI legislation. And that's really freedom of information is a main plank of my bill, and there's only 3 or 4 main planks in it. It's very important. We have seen in the last few weeks how extraordinarily difficult it is to obtain information about various banking boards, and the same not can be allowed to allow it to happen here. And it is happening right before our eyes. We're promised that it would be, but it's not. It has to be fully subject, no evacuation to full and active FOI. Okay. Number 2, I want an ombudsperson appointed. The need for a completely separate and independent water services ombudsman or ombudsperson was starkly highlighted this week by the release of the following information by the current ombudsman in relation to public services. And that wasn't at the time I bill, I didn't have this information in putting the bill together. Complaints to the ombudsman about public services rose by 11% to 3,500 in 2014. Launching his annual report on Wednesday this week, Ombudsman Peter Tyndall said the increase was mainly due to the additional 200 public bodies which came within his jurisdiction for a full year for the first time in 2014. And that's very telling. These included bodies in the education sector, such as the State Examinations Commission and Student Universal Support Ireland, SUSI. How is the current Ombudsman going to deal with the inevitable flood of complaints regarding Éireann, Irish water? And I often said the only thing I welcomed about Irish water was the Anam Éireann. That's the only thing that's good about it, as far as I can see. Nothing else. So we need a separate ombudsman to do what, so that we can do not completely undermine, so we do not completely undermine and overload the work of the current system. As we see from the report on Wednesday, it's totally overloaded. So with the amount of complaints that are going to be here, with the mess they have made of the billing and the contacting and all the rest of it, we've seen it unfold before our eyes all over the country. So wonder they're not billing people in England and America. That's how out of whack with their ICT systems and everything else. They probably will get. Obviously, the summary of advice to the Minister, Commissioner on Regulation, the CR recommended that, this is before it's set up, that the economic regulatory framework for public water services in Ireland is put in place, similar to that in the electricity and gas sectors, which is based on 4 key principles. And we had, the ESB was one to look at and admire and copy. Stability, predictability, sustainability and cost efficiency. The questions genuinely need to be asked: stability for who, cost efficiency for who, and predictability for what? Guys, this will make some film in years to come. Certainly not the many hundreds of thousands of households who will be trapped in repair costs. And that's another area I want an insurance policy built in to the fee. And if it costs a bit extra, fine, but at least when there's breaks in houses or when there's burst in houses, there will be some fallback for people on the breadline. And they're not all unemployed, or many of them unemployed, but they're also small business and ordinary low-income people. The CER also said in regulating the water sector, the CER would apply the same values as it has done to electricity and gas sectors, namely fair, transparent regulation, acting with integrity and respect, consulting with the stakeholders. Instead of setting up consultants' companies, you've changed the vocabulary and the dictionary in with this bill. Former Minister, the big man from Kilkenny, who's now the European Commissioner, former Deputy, I affectionately call him Big Phil Hogan, the enforcer. Being accountable to their operators, customers and stakeholders, and making informed decisions. None of that has happened. None of that has happened. This is an absolute joke. Over the course of the last number of years, there have been at least 8 increases in the price for household energy bills, all under the watch of the same Commission for Energy Regulation, that has done nothing to safeguard the interests of the households. Asleep at the wheel. We've seen how other regulators were found with their, you know what, down the last couple of weeks in different areas, and were asleep at the wheel, and they're going to offer big pensions. It's disgusting in the extreme, and people are sickened by it. And the CR went on to say that in order to ensure that regulatory framework continues to be appropriate to the future needs, priorities of the sector, the CR proposes to adjust, refine the economic regulatory framework over time, in line with the above principles. This is the kind of bureaucratic type of language whose only purpose is to sound firm and fair, while leaving plenty of wriggle room for major changes. It has nothing to do with the kind of certainty hundreds of our vulnerable households deserve and desire and are entitled to as citizens of the state. As I said, the insurance policy issue, the need for such a provision is most clearly highlighted by the ongoing revelations this week about the extent of lead piping throughout our water infrastructure. Indeed, I was in the weekly clinic now, which has become a joke, with Deputy Cowan and others during the week, and you know, this is a joke. I was promised answers. I phoned the people this morning and texted them from 7:30 this morning. I still didn't get answers. You will not get answers from anybody. Now, the man says straight answer, you get no answer. So families cannot be left with accumulated financial debt arising from exorbitant call-out fees. And we saw the fees, what were proposed. What is the alternative? To leave families with leaking pipes and ever-increasing bill for water, so they're cut no matter what way they turn. Up the field, down the field, up the road, over the road. They can't go anywhere. They won't even have water to wash themselves. We won't know what country we're living in. We're living in a foreign country, our own country. We won't be able to distinguish. On top of that, they would then still have to face the prospect of having to find hundreds of euros, if not thousands, to repairs carried out. And that's a fact. And this week, Minister Kelly, the invincible, now where he's today, I'm very disappointed the fellow Tipperary man wouldn't have the courtesy to turn up here today to debate this bill. Of course, he's saying he doesn't own it. He just inherited it, and it all belong to the Fine Gael party and Minister Hogan. That won't get him very far in Real Cross or Carrick-on-Suir, because people know the truth. Where is the clarity around the massive fees that we're talking about? And I've forgotten about now, but they were talking about and put into the public domain. How can a call-out fee like the proposed, and it was proposed, €120 an hour and €170 charges to be justified by families on social welfare? I happen to know a small bit about pipes, all kinds of pipes, and I know that if you were to do a survey of lead in a house or whatever, your first hour wouldn't be ongoing, or your second hour. So these bills would amount to far more than what it would cost to pay the water bill. So it's a real tricky loop job here, and catch me any way you can. But when it comes to the election, the minister will be caught, and he has no place to run. He won't be saying, catch me if you can. I also want clarity around the future sale or semi-private or whatever, public-private partnership or whatever vehicle or wild animal you go in again to name it as, and flog it like he did last week with Aer Lingus. Sure, as soon as it gets dark tonight and get bright tomorrow morning, this is what's going to happen. So I want a straight yes or no in the bill. Not to be sold without a referendum. You're able to hold referendums for lots of things. So you can hold one on this quite easily. And you could have added this to the last one instead of the joke you had about the age for the park. I want something akin towards replacing that shall or may. And my wording is will not be sold or cannot be sold inserted into primary legislation. Nothing more, nothing less. Unequivocal, straight language. You know how people will say yes or no, and not shall or may or whatever, and get barristers in the forecourts to be arguing the connotations of that for ad infinitum. So that's four main planks, really. Referendum about the future sale of it, freedom of information, which is vital, and also, as I said, an insurance policy regarding the breaks and what exorbitant costs could arise from the stopcock, which could be out on the road, and it could be a mile away from your house, all the way along to your front gate, in your driveway, and into the back of the house or wherever. The ombudsman issues. Vital that there's an ombudsperson appointed here, because there are going to be thousands and thousands of complaints. We have them already in our days. Every TD here, every member of this Parliament and the Senate and councils, and no answers. And they took over, they inherited totally the whole pipe network, the whole sources and everything else. You would have thought, listening to Taoiseach and Tánaiste, that there wasn't even a pipe in the ground. We were in the desert, in the Sahara. We hadn't a drop of water anywhere until Irish Water came along. Such an insult to the people that served this country, the pioneers and the group schemes and the public service. And I must thank them that designed it, the engineering officials that designed it in all the county councils. And had a reasonable network. I know we have problems here in Dublin, but if you were looking after yourself, you'd have a better supply by now. Not trying to go down and raid the Shannon. The years of Cromwell are gone. You deal with people upfront and fairly, and you begin cost-saving and you begin water-saving initiatives, which is not one initiative in the whole thing. But then we have the issue of the joke. Your party are responsible for this solely, and try to get out of the mess, Minister. Tánaiste Burton has confirmed this week only again that €637,000 was being paid for a consulting company to do the IT to pay back the €100 to the families. Did you ever hear the debate of it? Play school children wouldn't walk into this like this. But of course the consultants, who are the bearings point, formerly a unit of KPMG. So here we have it, a whole lot in one cozy network. We want a good fire hose to scatter that crowd. We want more than water in the fire hose to scatter the rot of the big consultants, the big business, and what's going on, plundering this country, and have plundered it before the eyes of the people. And successive governments have allowed it to go on. So we're going to pay €637,000 for IT alone to give back the €100. Did you ever hear such BUL? Unbelievable. Why you couldn't just deduct the €100 off the bill? As I said, children in preschool. Children not even born yet would know that. For God's sake, this is laughable. And you think you're paying consultants, paying advisors, and paying everybody else to screw the people and to take everything off of them. Another nice nearly $1 million gone here. And I also heard at the time department officials and union officials demanding more staff for social welfare to deal with this. They shouldn't have anything to do with it. They have enough to do with dealing with social welfare, and there are many good issues there, or good staff there as well, dealing with their own business without being dragged into this mess to kind of calm the fire. And why you couldn't just let that out and deal with it that way. But no, there'd be no consultants involved. There'd be no more money, gravy trains for the boys. And you couldn't give back, deduct €100. 1 from 2 is 1. It's quite simple. I mean, we didn't have any IT skills or any mathematic graduates to do that. I mean, it's just tomfoolery of the highest order, skullduggery, and I could get a lot stronger words, but I don't want to use them in this chamber with respect to the Council and everybody else. It's a failure, it's a disaster, It's a wild animal, a beast, I call it. We have another issue on our shores today with BSE, but this is worse than any animals with BSE because it's created, I've said it before, and I hope the County won't tell it's set up corruptly. Now, and not people inside it, but the whole basic...
making allegations like that. There's no corruption proven in this.
Well, it's unfolding before our eyes, Count Cola.
No.
I hate using the word.
No, don't use it.
Yeah, well, I'll use, it's set up for jobs for the boys. A naked example of jobs for the boys. We set up this company.
It's not country.
Well, it's not far away then, Count Cola. All right, I'll withdraw the word so. And the girls, but I mean, not the ordinary workers. I'm talking about the consultants, the companies. We've all the debate the last week about sidestep and everything else. It's just despicable. And the sooner we realise that he's a sick animal, and we call in the VITs, and we call in ISPCC, and we bring off this beast and give it a nice date, have a wake, have a burial, have a small celebration, and carry on with running the country. And the people always had water, and they will always have water, and support the ordinary people, and not be taking all their funds, and not be trying to destroy them, and look at all the strife it's causing, and above all, interfering with the everyday work of social welfare, which should be dealing with their own problems, not setting up companies here and IT systems to give back €100 to farmers and everybody else that have a septic tank and a water supply of their own. They never asked. They never went near Irish water, and we're going to give them €100.
Time is up, Deputy.
I appreciate that, Count Cola. Thank you for forbearance.
Could we call the Minister, please?
Ken Corder, I want to thank Deputy McGrath for giving me the opportunity to address the issues associated with the bill that he has published. The provision of sustainable water services is of critical importance to citizens and the economy of our country. As you will all be aware, modernising and improving water services, the water service delivery in Ireland is a key objective in the programme for government. The establishment of Irish water has been one of the most significant elements along a wide range of public sector reform measures achieved by the government. The move towards the utility model will deliver major benefits to our people and to our economy in a number of ways, notably through providing a more structured and coordinated approach to the delivery of water services on a national basis, achieving economies of scale and service delivery, and more efficient procurement of materials and services, reducing unacceptable levels of waste from the drinking water distribution system, with an estimated 40% of treated drinking water being unaccounted for prior to the establishment of Irish Water, and reducing the overall costs in delivering water services. The establishment of Irish Water within Bord Gáis Éireann, which has now been renamed Éireann, was an important step in assisting the utility to leverage the existing core expertise available to Bord Gáis as a modern and efficiently run utility. Éireann and Irish Water estimate that establishing Irish Water within the BGE group has saved potentially tens of millions of euro. In the longer term, establishment of Irish Water will lead to a more efficient service due to economies of scale and to a higher quality and more resilient service due to increased capacity to invest and innovate. It's important to note that the reform of water services is not only important to deliver better value for money to our citizens, but is also critical to support economic development and growth. By 2030, the world is expected to need 40% more water than will be available. We are distinct from most countries by the level of fresh water available, a benefit we can turn to our advantage by creating a world-class water sector that can attract water-intensive industries such as ICT, Pharmachem and agri-food to Ireland. These industries combined already sustain well over 200,000 jobs between them. So moving to the specific elements of the bill tabled by Deputy McGrath, this bill aims to amend the Water Services No. 2 Act 2013 to provide for the following: Irish Water to be subject to freedom of information legislation, creating a dedicated independent ombudsman for resolving disputes related to Irish Water, ensuring that Irish Water will not be transferred to private ownership or public-private partnership without such ownership or partnership being put before the people via referendum, and requiring that the Minister direct Irish Water within 2 years of its establishment to provide for the provision of an insurance policy to all its customers with respect to water leakage and damaged infrastructure. I must state at this stage that a number of the proposals in this bill have already been comprehensively dealt with through legislation introduced by the government. I'm referring first to the inclusion by Minister Brendan Howlin of Irish Water under FOI legislation. The Water Services Act 2014 then included the requirement that any proposal to change the ownership status of Irish Water would first be put to the people of the country. Protecting the interests of customers of Irish Water has been a high priority for the government throughout the water reform process. To ensure this protection, the 2014 Act provided that the Commissioner for Energy Regulation, which had previously been assigned the function for water regulation, was also specifically required to establish the dispute resolution for Irish water customers. And I'll deal with each specific proposal contained in the bill in turn. On freedom of information, Irish Water is already subject to freedom of information legislation. Under the Freedom of Information Act 1997, prescribed by these regulations 2014, Irish Water is subject to the provisions of the FOI Act since the 17th of July 2013. On the Ombudsman for Water, 2013, on the independent Ombudsman for Water, it was a policy decision of the government to establish Irish Water as a public utility, and this is reflected in the legislation passed by the Oireachtas. The legislative framework that the government has put in place to establish Irish Water and the CER as the economic regulator for Irish Water means that there is a robust process for the protection of consumer interests and clearly demonstrates that the customer was at the centre of government's thinking when framing the legislation. As you can see from the extensive activity being undertaken by the CER, this is operating effectively. In addition, the CER has given a specific statutory role under the Water Services Act 2014 in relation to dispute resolution for Irish water customers. This will involve a similar service that operated by the CER for the gas and electricity sectors, where they can investigate customer complaints which Irish Water has not resolved. I don't believe that the creation of a dedicated independent ombudsman for resolving disputes related to Irish Water, as suggested in the bill, is therefore warranted. Similar to the approach it has taken in the electricity and gas industries, the CER has also required Irish Water to submit a customer handbook outlining the minimum requirements of customer service standards they would provide to their customers. The customer handbook comprises Irish Water's customer charter, codes of practice and the terms and conditions of supply. Along with these measures, the CER will be engaging with both Irish Water and the Environmental Protection Agency to develop complementary complaints processes to ensure customers are directed in an efficient manner to the appropriate organisation with their complaint or query. In this regard, it should be noted that Irish Water is also subject to the statutory supervision by the EPA and the Health Service Executive in respect of any environmental and health and human health aspects of its water services provision. On the ownership of Irish Water, it be made very clear that this government is totally opposed to the privatisation of public water services, and there is no question of the services being privatised. The Irish Water Services Act 2013 provides for the establishment of Irish Water as a subsidiary of Bord Gáis Éireann, conforming to the conditions contained in the Act and registered under the Companies Act. The Act provides that Irish Water is registered as a private company limited by shares under the Companies Act, with one share in Irish Water issued to Bord Gáis Éireann, now Arvia, and the remaining shares allocated equally between the Minister for the Environment and the Minister for Finance. As Arvia is a fully state-owned company, Irish Water is accordingly in full state ownership. Subsequently, an amendment introduced in the Water Services No. 2 Act 2013 prohibits each of the three shareholders from disposing of their shareholding in Irish Water and thus places a statutory prohibition on the privatisation of Irish Water. To copper fasten this prohibition, the Water Services Act 2014 provides that any proposal by a future government for legislation that would involve any change in the state's ownership of Irish Water, as outlined above, will require the approval of both houses of the Oireachtas, and subsequently any proposal will have to be put to the people via plebiscite before any such legislation could even proceed. Finally, on this matter, there is a further statutory provision which safeguards water services infrastructure and public ownership. Section 3112 of the Water Services Act 2007 prevents Irish Water from entering into any agreement or arrangement with another person which involves or may involve the transfer of assets and infrastructure from Irish Water to that person. Irish Water insurance policy for customers. It is not the function of Irish Water to provide any type of insurance policy for customers in terms of leaks or damaged infrastructure. Under the Water Services Act 2007, responsibility for repair and maintenance of the internal water distribution system from the main stopcock to the house and within the house rests with the homeowner. It is similar to the situation with other utility services such as gas or electricity. The proposal in the bill to change responsibility for internal repairs and maintenance would have very significant implications from a financial perspective for Irish Water and could have wide-ranging impacts for other utility service providers. I do not believe, therefore, that the proposal in the bill is an appropriate approach to take on the issue. This morning's debate provides an important opportunity to remind the House of the significant progress that has been made in implementing the government's water sector reform programme, a programme that is based on three pillars: the establishment of a national utility to provide water and wastewater services on a national basis, the establishment of a sustainable funding model for water services underpinned by domestic and non-domestic water charges, and the ability of the national utility to borrow from capital markets to increase infrastructural spending, to increase annual expenditure from about 300 million per annum when Irish Water was established to at least 600 million per annum. The introduction of an independent economic regulation of Irish Water, which has been assigned to the Commission for Energy Regulation. With each new challenge in our public water system that Irish Water confronts, the underlying need for reform becomes increasingly clear. The justification becomes stronger. Public water services were and remain in need of change to the way they are delivered, as did the way they were funded. The previous system of providing water services through local authorities was not working, despite the best efforts of the dedicated and experienced staff involved. Local authorities were restricted in their ability to borrow, so they could not invest adequately in the system. The time taken to make decisions to invest was often slow, bureaucratic and inefficient. Planning for new water services largely stopped at the county boundary, so there was limited opportunity to achieve economies of scale on a regional or national basis. We saw and continue to see the results of this fundamentally flawed approach in almost every city, town and county. There are major issues around the quality of water supply and the capacity of the existing system to supply treated water in the quantities needed by households, business and industry. For example, 20,123 people on boil water notices from 21 supplies, and over 955,000 people depend on drinking water supplies that are at risk of failing the required standards. Almost half the water treated at significant cost escapes through leaks and is unaccounted for. By way of example, Irish Water was able to establish that 22 households were leaking over 1 million litres a day into their driveways. That's enough to serve the needs in one day in the town of Gorey. 44 towns where largely untreated sewage is running into our rivers and seas, including popular seaside towns such as Cove, Youghal and Bundoran. This can't be allowed to continue or be hugely damaging to the vital tourism sector. In Dublin, more than 800 kilometres of pipe is over 100 years old. There is insufficient supply for the Greater Dublin area. Earlier this year, Irish Water published a project needs report which identified that projected demand for water in Dublin alone is expected to increase by over 50% by 2050. This is far beyond the capacity of the existing sources which serve the region. Nationally, our population is increasing, our economy is growing, and our climate is changing. These realities bring new demands and challenges for our water system, realities that a single national utility is best equipped to manage. By 2030, our river basin management plans will have been reviewed a further 3 times, and the quality of our water bodies will have to be improved. Our rivers, lakes and other water bodies need greater protection, not just for the protection of public health and our natural environment, but to ensure our thriving tourism industry can continue to prosper under the banner of Ireland's image as a clean, green country. The 3 pillars of reform: a national utility, a new sustainable funding model, the introduction of independent economic regulation, have been implemented and are leading to major changes in how we plan and deliver water infrastructure and services. Irish Water has introduced fundamental reforms to the planning and delivery of water services. It has adopted a new approach to asset management, for example, which has resulted in a significant change of approach to infrastructural delivery. Central strategic planning is now based on accurate asset performance data and full control of all investment decisions. The utility is now planning investment consistently across the asset base rather than on large-scale one-off investments. An example of this is the proposed Ringsend wastewater treatment plant upgrade, where an alternative approach to a treatment plant extension will save the company $170 million in capital investment. It has standardised certain operational procedures, which is leading to benefits in performance and energy costs. It is conducting plant and process audits. These are identifying repair needs, assisting in planned maintenance programmes, and providing for efficiency scoping. It has produced utility systems to manage spend, improve value for money, and to capture the condition and performance of water services infrastructure. Under the service level agreements, annual plans for the 2014-2017 transformation plan has begun implementing other initiatives that will standardise and modernise operations as asset management, customer service, procurement improvement, and assets data intelligence. An example of this are the handheld devices that council staff will be given so they can be given work orders quickly to fix water problems and report back when they are completed, and the single national laboratory service for testing water samples. Greater economies of scale, which are possible through having one national utility rather than separate 31 separate local authorities, has resulted in €12 million in procurement savings in the company's first year alone. In the area of electricity supply, a major cost in the production of water, Irish Water's current renewable and efficiency energy initiatives aim to reduce costs by 33% by 2020. In April 2014, Irish Water became the main contact point for customer queries and reports regarding water supply outages and water quality through its customer call service centre. This development was another milestone along the road to achieving a single standardised national service throughout the country, with a greater focus on those who use the public services. Such progress would not have been possible Without strong cooperation between Irish Water and local authorities, which have had decades of experience of providing water and wastewater services with great care and dedication. The 12-year service level agreements, now almost a year in existence, have proven to be a strong partnership between the local authorities' expertise in operations and the considerable network and utility management experience within the Ervia Group. This was most evidenced during Storm Darwin in February last year, when the two parties collaborated effectively to address emergency situations and maintain clear lines of communication with each other and with the public during a time of pressure on the public water system. The scale of the rollout of the metering programme has been particularly impressive. By any measurement, the domestic metering programme has been a success. Unparalleled anywhere in scale or ambition, Irish Water has installed almost 700,000 metres in just over 21 months. The utility surpassed its end-of-year target in 2014, 6 weeks ahead of schedule, and is delivering a programme that is sustaining approximately 1,050 jobs throughout the country, providing the kind of economic stimulus we need. 80% of these jobs are held by people in one of three social inclusion categories, namely the unemployed, employees of SMEs, or graduate school leavers or apprentices. This far exceeds the government's original target of 25%. As well as facilitating usage-based charging, which international evidence shows can reduce domestic consumption by up to 10%, the metering programme is detecting consumer-side leakage. Irish Water estimates that about 6% of all water produced is lost through consumer-side leakage. The presence of meters is helping Irish Water identify leakage that is now being fixed through the interim First Fix Free scheme. The interim phase of this scheme covers leaks from the boundary of the property to a point as close as possible to the dwelling, but will not include leaks internal to the dwelling or other buildings on the property. This involves identifying customer-side leakage between the meter box and the point of entry into the house, offering repairs of these leaks to customers. The utility has offered over 2,500 customers leak investigations under the interim scheme and plans on issuing 7,500 notifications regarding larger leaks, with notifications prioritised in order of size of leak to maximise potential water savings. It plans to conduct the associated leak investigations and qualifying repairs.
Your time has expired.
Okay.
I'm sure you can come to the reply.
Yeah.
Thank you. I now call on Deputy Brian Stanley, who has 10 minutes.
Thanks, Concorda, and I welcome the opportunity to speak on this bill. I want to compliment Deputy McGrath for bringing it forward. While we wouldn't agree with everything in it, the spirit of the bill and certainly the intentions in it, we would support. The minister has handed out a long script, and he has set out in that the national utility, the three pillars of reform, the success setting up the national utility. I wouldn't consider the setting up of Irish Water a success. The sustainable funding model, I'd ask you to look at the operational funding for this year and the sources, Minister, and the capital investment, and look at the voodoo economics that's being performed there in relation to the write-off of rates, the so-called water conservation grant that you don't have to save a drop of water for, and the transfer of 500 million euros in one stroke of a pen in December back onto the state's balance sheet in a water debt. 500 million in one stroke of a pen in the bill you brought forward just before Christmas that has now been landed back onto the state's balance sheets, which is exactly the opposite to what the stated intention of your government is with Irish Water. Was supposed to be to get all these costs off the balance sheet. Well, the costs are accumulating on the balance sheet, Minister, and the sums are there. They're not my sums, they're your sums. So we've seen that. The facts are is the Irish Water needs to be abolished and replaced with a proper public company that's fit for purpose. And I have stated this many times. I know some commentators have been slow to pick up on this, but if they check the Dáil record, they will see that. And in particularly last December, on the 4th of December, when I outlined our position regarding the need to dismantle Irish Water. Would support passing the bill at this stage and let it go for committee where it does need, we believe it does need to be amended. I have to say that unfortunately certain groups which are claiming that Sinn Féin holds a different position to what I've outlined, despite the fact that I've been on the record many occasions in the House calling for Irish Water to be replaced, and that's there on the record. In April, our party also published a water services repeal bill that would have legislated for the abolition of both water charges, domestic water charges and Irish Water, but it wasn't allowed to come before the House because it would have involved, there was a funding implication. But we provided for that in our budget submission last year. So to return to the substance of the bill, the main focus this week has been on the issue of obtaining information or not being able to obtain information from Irish Water under the Freedom of Information Act. Deputy McGrath's bill calls for the company to be made fully subject to FOI, and I know that the bill was drafted before that provision was put in, but it's not fully complying with that. All of us have tried to get information of Irish Water and have had difficulty with that. I had a priority question as well down to try and another attempt to get further information from the Minister in relation to the number of bills paid, Minister, and the number of bills sent out and the number of bills paid, and that was ruled out of order. So there's a big wall between us and information. You know, we were told, and I remember addressing this to Minister Hogan across the chamber several times, you know, because he kept saying it would be a standalone semi-state company, and I know what that means, and you know what it means, and everybody in this House knows what it means. It can circle itself, and it doesn't have to disclose certain information. And I predicted that this would happen, and that's what has happened. But there's clearly a reluctance on the part of government to have Irish Water provide information like this. We should know in this House how many bills now have been sent out and how many bills have been paid. But it also appeared to strongly indicate that the numbers of people who haven't paid, you know, is far higher than the government would like people to realise, or Irish Water, or want us to believe. Just with Deputy McGrath's proposal, the Freedom of Information Act, of course, does apply now, but there are problems. And, you know, I would request that the Minister ensure that the company is complying fully with the statutory obligations to supply information under the FOIs that have been submitted to them. Just in relation to the bill's reference to having a referendum, I think that the Sinn Féin proposal to actually preempt that and to have Deputy McGrath wants a referendum before it could be sold off. What we were saying is that at this point we should put a constitutional provision, a clause into the Constitution allowing the public to do that so as to protect Irish Water from being sold off is the best way of doing that. The government to put in legislation, and you were saying, and I accept what you're saying, that at this point you wouldn't like to see Irish Water being sold off, right? Now some may question that because of what you're doing with Aer Lingus, but I accept, we'll assume that that is the case. But future governments, you know, I mean, who's going to be in here in 10 years' time? You know, we have all these new parties. You could have brand new, you know, a right-wing coalition of God knows what concoction here in 10 years' time, representing God knows, you know what I mean? And they could do it. And that's the fear, and I'm saying that to you genuinely, Minister. You know, our bill to have the referendum to insert a clause in the Constitution would have firmly placed the ownership of the water resources and water services in the hands of the people. And your approach with just legislation is weak. The reason water services all over the world were in public hands is not through ideology, it's just hard facts. Governments recognised that water was important, and secondly, the system of public water supply to houses, when that was established, private companies weren't interested, and weren't interested thus far throughout the world. But now they are starting to become interested because, you know, you have the services and infrastructure has been built up over many years. Just in regards to the operation of Irish Water itself, recent reports on the continuing level of leaks and the number of lead pipes prove that rehabilitation of the system is not taking place. Priority has been given to the meters, and you're correct. They're being milled in, right? They're being put in at a huge rate, but they're being put into a leaking system. And what you just said, that 6% of leaking water is coming out of domestic, on the domestic side of the meter, we'll accept that. If we accept that, that means 3% of water is leaking on the domestic side of the meter. You know, but there's 50% leaking out of the total system. There's another 47% going out of public infrastructure, and you've clarified that. So indeed, the mounting number of cases, there's another problem as well in relation to the insurance. And, you know, the spirit of Deputy McGrath saying here, there's a point in this. I had a case in Portlaoise, which I raised in this House, I raised it with the Minister, in relation to where a contractor fitted meters in a housing estate, an Oaklawn housing estate, and one woman who was widowed, she was away, and she came back after a few days, and what happened was they fitted a meter, to turn back on the meter, and I've questioned this with engineers. What happens is the old stopcocks, you have to wind them several times to turn them on and off. But with the new meters, you just give one half turn and full force. So the contractor turned back onto water. He blew the middle out of the filter in the water softener, which is in the utility room, destroyed the whole house, destroyed the utilities within the room. And I tried to get a resolution for that with her. She tried, and we have failed, because it's bounced back and forward between the contractor and the and Irish Water, and we hit a brick wall in it. So there's no protection, and the actions of contractors are causing problems for householders. And I raised that case very genuinely. I went around to that woman's house twice, and one of her councillors brought it to my attention. And, you know, I'm very disappointed to say that that unfortunate woman got no resolution. She's left to carry the can herself, thousands of euros worth of damage. Just in relation to the proposal to have a dedicated ombudsman, I think the proposal that that our party had regarding maintaining public water services in public hands, and to have a proper accountable public body that would be accountable here to the Oireachtas, that would negate the need for an ombudsman. Now, the Minister has highlighted the CER, the Commission for Energy Regulation, but Minister, he brushed that to one side. Alan Kelly drove a bulldozer over them last October and November. You know, they might as well not exist. You know, to quote Mao Zedong, they're a paper tiger. You know, that's what Chairman Mao would describe them as. And anybody who looked at the actions of what the government done last autumn with the CER was you basically steamrolled over them. So they're ineffectual, they're a paper tiger, useless at this stage. The people working in them might be well-intentioned, but they have been rendered totally obsolete. So if the water services were constitutionally protected and we had the abolition of Irish Water and a proper public body that's accountable here to the Oireachtas and the Public Accounts Committee and the Minister, that would solve that problem. Just to conclude then, we'll be supporting the passage of the bill to the next stage, and we're doing so on the basis that there are aspects of it, I believe, that could be addressed in other ways, and I've outlined some of those. But it does at least address major issues, and we need to look again at the whole issue of water services. And I think the Deputy has done us a service in you know, bringing it up at this point and getting the bill in here, and the whole mess surrounding Irish Water. And Minister, to conclude now, I know you only got halfway through your script. It is like one of those long scripts that Chinese leaders
you have to conclude as well.
But if we just say that, you mentioned that it will be cheaper. It will not be cheaper. This service is not going to be cheaper than it is provided for up to now. And there was substantial money put into rehabilitation of water mains during the term before you came into government. It has slowed down, and it's going to become more costly to operate it. So I predict that this is a bad day's work.
Deputy McGrath.
Okay, thank you, Concorda. And again, I want to thank you for the opportunity of speaking to this new piece of legislation, the Water Services Amendment Bill. I welcome the bill, and I commend Deputy Mattie McGrath for bringing it forward before the House. Now, I know things have moved on and there has been changed over the last number of months, but I think from Deputy Mattie McGrath's point of view, it's a very clear and very sensible piece of legislation which tries to deal with the whole issue of Irish water and its responsibility to the people of this country. And I think that's the important thing in relation to this debate, even though we've moved on a little bit over the last few months. The whole background to this whole issue of water in the state and water charges was a national disgrace. And the government handling of it, and the consultants, and the lack of transparency, and the lack of accountability that has been gone on over the last number of months is absolutely appalling from a government that promised change and reform and openness and accountability. So the question a lot of people are saying, what the hell is going on here? And the issue is, even this week, we've seen senior minister, we've seen the Taoiseach refusing to answer questions in this House to members of the Oireachtas in relation to Irish water and also the amount of people have paid, who's paying, and simple questions like that. And yet they run a mile to answering these questions. Now, I don't think that's good enough, and I don't think that's acceptable, and I don't think that's been transparent, and I certainly don't think that's been accountable. Now, in relation to Deputy Mattie McGrath's legislation, as I said before, I commend him for his great work on this particular issue. Now, when you look at the three key things in the legislation, it's primarily an attempt to rein in the ability of Irish Water to further mire hundreds of thousands of households in repair-related debt, which could run into multiples of the annual water charge. There's also provision there for the establishment of the Independent Water Ombudsman and the retention of the state water infrastructure in public hands, which I strongly support. And then, of course, it deals with the issue as well of full transparency and accountability of Irish water under the Freedom of Information legislation. Now, I accept the point that this has moved on since that. But what I'm saying is, though, despite this, despite these efforts, we still have people in the Dáil, ministers and in the cabinet, that will not answer questions. And that, to me, is an appalling situation to have. And that, to me, is also very upsetting for the taxpayers and the people of this country. Now, another issue in recent days that has come up as well is about the serious issue of lead in pipes, and also that whole issue of the public safety system. We now have in the region, I believe, of over 200,000 houses that it could have these lead pipes in their homes. And now we have a situation, I know in my own constituent, Dublin Bay North, people of St Anne's, in Raheny, Marino, Artane, Coolock, they've all been onto my office about this particular issue. And they're very, very concerned about that. Here they are being asked to pay for Irish water, and then at the same time they find out they have to go out and fix the water themselves. Now, I believe that some sort of a small grant could come available for some people, but this will be means tested. But the vast majority of people are going to be hammered again. And some people are talking about costs, extra costs to the family of the region of 5,000 or 6,000 euro. And that, to me, is once again an example of the people on the ground being hammered again by this government. But to go back to the other issue, the cost issue is an important issue. But the big issue for me is the whole issue of the public health issue. Now, the Minister has said earlier on there's going to be some campaign in relation to this. But they need more than a campaign to deal with this particular issue. Lead in pipes is a major, serious issue for health, for public safety. And lead in pipes for women that are pregnant, for potentially, there's a potential there of increasing the amount of children born with a disability. And we have to focus on this public issue. We see the reaction already to the issue of the BSc over the last 12 hours. And by the way, we all hope that works out well, because regardless of politics, we all want to see our agri-sector flourish and develop as it has been doing. But to go back to the issue of the lead in the pipes, the issue is here, there's a major public safety, and this needs to be tackled head on, and with no point of coming out with statements and woolly campaigns. That's not enough. We have a major potential here, health crisis, and we need to focus on this in relation to this particular issue. So I'd say to the Minister and say to the Irish water people, you have to wake up, smell the coffee, and deal with the issue as well. And then, of course, I mean, the Minister has already said in his speech, where he said there are 20,123 people on boiled water nurses from 21 supplies, and over 955,000 people depend on drinking water supplies that are at risk of failing the required standards. Now, that is something that's absolutely a major public risk as well. But I'd say to the Minister and I'd say to the government is, what have you been doing over the last 12 months? We've heard about the leaks in the pipes, we've heard about the lead in the pipes, and now we see the people with boiled water nurses. So what I say to them is, get on, do the job, fix the leaks and sort the water out as well. We also, I mentioned about in Dublin City alone, I think we've in the region of nearly 800 to 900 kilometres of pipes, which is over 100 years old. Another issue which has been left out of this debate is the environmental issue in relation to Irish water and what's going on. We have a beautiful lake down in County Tipperary called Lough Derg, which is very beautiful, lots of tourists, and I know the Minister knows the area well, around Drummond and places like that. But they have major concerns about that. Irish Water proposing to take the water from the lake there. And basically, what their concerns is they could lower the water levels, and people are concerned about fishing, they're concerned about tourism, and they're also concerned about loss of revenue. So these are issues as well that are linked in to the water issue, that are also linked into the broader debate of what's going on in this country. And again, it goes back to one thing: competence, quality planning and quality services. And we have a long way to go for that. And also the issue as well, which has not been mentioned at all today, in relation to the whole issue of water charges and the broader issue of what's going on in society over the last 4 years, and particularly on the issue of austerity. And I don't accept what's going on here at the moment in relation to right across the European Union, where some countries are bullying other countries in relation to issues like debt. And we've seen in the IBRC debate during the week, some people get their debts written off, but if you're a regular mortgage holder, you get screwed again, or you get nasty letters, or they come along and sell your house. So what I'm saying is there needs to be a change of attitude in the government, and they need to get off the pitch and stop bullying little countries like Greece, for example. It was not Syriza, by the way, Minister, who destroyed Greece. It was a centrist, it was a successive centre-right government, Cancora, but I'm just linking this into Irish water. So what I mean, it's a consequence of what happened in Greece as well. So to go back to the core issue as well, I think it's very important, again, when you look at what Deputy Mattie McGrath is doing in his legislation, he's also trying to amend the Water Services Act 2013 to make the provision for Irish water to be finally subject to freedom of information, which was already, we accept that point. The board of the subsidiary in relation to the performance by the board of the subsidiary of the functions under this act should be fully subject to freedom of information requests. Again, I've raised this issue because we've seen this lack of transparency coming up over the last few days. So what I say finally, Cancora, I think it's important that when we're discussing the issue of Irish water and this legislation, we need to ensure that we also focus on the issue of the cost of this project. Number two is the amount of money that's been wasted, the serious public health issues that I've raised this morning in the debate, particularly into boiled water nose, but also the more serious issues that has been come across in relation to lead. We need to up our game in relation to public safety on this issue. 200,000 houses there and families are potentially at risk, and we need action. We don't need windy campaigns. We need sensible policies to go forward. So finally, Cancora, I want to commend my colleague, Deputy Mattie McGrath, for bringing this legislation before the House. It shows once again the importance of the need to have independent voices in the Dáil, and I know my colleague here, Deputy Barry Cowan, will strongly endorse that statement. And you need people that are there to bring forward new ideas, to bring forward a vision for this country, to bring forward policies for this country that will help people in Irish society, and in this case, it will help to develop the water services in this island. Thank you.
Very much. Deputy Collins.
Myself or Cowan? I thought Deputy Cowan was next.
No, this is private members, so whoever comes first is called. So
Grand stuff.
First out of the traps, as they say.
I'm delighted to be able to speak on Deputy Mattie McGrath's bill. I think it's important to keep raising this issue in this House as much as we can, because this issue, as you know, Minister, is one of the biggest issues at the doorsteps of many people right across this country. The toxic entity of Irish water, from the very inception, has been opposed by the citizens of the state categorically, and we've seen that in the huge response of people out in the streets. And it's only because of that huge response of people, thousands and thousands of people coming out in the streets and opposing it, that this government were forced to backtrack on many of the issues that were initially in the bill brought in by this government. And I want to read out, just for the record of the House, you know, Fianna Fáil agreed this with the Troika to privatise Irish water, to set up Irish water, and to commodify Irish water. And this government carried on the policy, and you see, it's absolutely amazing that Labour Party TDs can come in here and back up what you have brought into being, because Minister Howland was opposed to service charges. Many of the TDs in the Labour Party were opposed to service charges. I have a leaflet from Deputy Eric Bourne when he was a councillor and standing for the 2000 general election, where he says a number of issues will emerge in the forthcoming general election: massive job redundancies, poor state of the poor state of our health, the education system. And he says service charges will also be an issue. Be warned, the same politicians who brought you rubbish charges are planning to introduce new water charges and other service charges. You should ask all canvassers, do you support service charges? Do you support jailing people? You know where I stand on these issues. I've been opposed to service charges long before this general election, and yet the same TDs can come in here and vote in an entity called Irish Water, which has commodified a very basic need, an actual human need, a crucial human need, such as water. An absolute scandal. I think the Labour Party should be ashamed of themselves, because we know what happens when you commodify utilities. It's happened with the bin charges. It's why people like ourselves and Eric Byrne at the time opposed bin charges, because we knew once you commodify them, they become an attraction of the big lobby groups throughout Europe and throughout the world in trying to grab these resources. Water is the new oil. We know that. From Dublin to Detroit, from Bray to Bolivia, the water is a big issue in relation to people demanding that their water remains in the public entity and shouldn't be commodified. Now, the outrageous statements of some people saying that we never paid for water and we have to pay for water. We have always paid for our water through VAT and motor tax. €1.2 billion went to local authorities every year to pay for our water. Now, how that money was used is a question that could have been resolved by working through the local authorities in relation to pulling together those different sections of the local authorities that dealt with water together as a national grouping, and that's what should have been done to address these issues. And I remember many times on Dublin City Council raising the issues of water and the fixing of our leaks, and we were informed at the time that there wasn't a problem with having the money. The problem was going out to tendering. The problem was the tendering process, and that the Dublin City Council had to go through every time it had to tender out for fixing pipes in our system. That was one of the major problems. It took months and months and months for the tendering process, and then by the time they got the process, the tender through, it took another long period of time to actually get the workers together to actually fix the pipes. They were the issues that should have been addressed by this government, not bringing in a toxic entity, as I said, of Irish Water to do these things. Now, you said that the water metering system, or the water metering, is going really well. It's not going really well, Minister. In many areas, our water meters have been resisted. In Donegal, the companies that are wanting to put in water meters have pulled out of it because they feel they cannot do it. In many areas, like in Dublin City, in the big working class areas, there's been huge resistance to it. People don't want the water meters in. They see water meters as a next step to privatisation. And this is the area that people are really concerned about. I myself, linking in with the community in my own area in Parnell Road in Crumlin, where the residents did not want water meters put in, and we were arrested, quite over the top in relation to how that whole situation was dealt with. And we feel that peaceful protests must be respected by Irish Water and by the Guards and by the state. It's not a way to go about things, and it causes major friction in the communities, and the good work that Guards probably have done, community Guards particularly, have done in the communities, will be threatened if this sort of action continues. And, you know, it's when you talk about the Irish Water, you know, all the progressive parts of Irish Water, that it's doing this, it's doing that, the boil notices, getting rid of that. That could have all been done by the local authorities, easily have been done by a coherent strategy within the local authorities nationally to deal with it. And you know that, because you know how good the people in the local authorities were, particularly in the water sections, in the water departments of the local authorities. They were excellent. They knew every part of our city. And to come around and say that only recently Irish Water has realised, or that the government has realised, that we have problems with lead pipes. Sure, we knew that for years. We knew that any house over 70 years old was a problem with lead piping and a potential problem with lead in our water. We knew that. We've known it for decades, and yet the government people here on that side of the House and on this side of the House